Hey guys, it's Bill from Linden, Tennessee. Well, I think we've actually got something here, guys. And gals. I don't think there's very many gals out there. But if there is, we've got something here. In the last video, I just sort of got this geometry all set up so that it would work and follow the train and all that stuff, but I was really disappointed in how it looked. Here's a little screenshot. Yeah, that just looks stupid. So I kind of brainstormed over a little bit, and I came up with something that I think looks pretty cool. Do I think it looks amazing? No. I'm not sure what would make it look amazing. I think if this had some like cutouts in it, so that this was more like a skeleton, like if it had a little rounded off triangle there and a sort of trapezoid thing down there, that'd make it look cooler. If I had a CNC plasma cutter, then I could have done something like that. But I don't. And I could have simulated something like that with like a hole saw and the cutoff wheel, but my thought on that is it's probably stronger this way. Well, it is stronger this way. Maybe not a lot, but whatever. I couldn't do it. And I went ahead and made, replaced that one that was all chopped in pieces and stiffened that up and made these two so they're the exact same, and got the arm length all established. And I actually went through and cut off all this stuff. So that deck was empty. I cut off these top mounts there. We haven't talked about those yet, but cut off those top mounts and took this plate off, put it on the desk, and made sure that they were centered and left and right and at the same angle. I made my little shear plates right there. Those weren't on there last time. And then once those were on there, stand by, I could take this doohickey. It's just a 3/4 inch flat bar that I got milled down to 5/8, which is the width of the heim joints. And I could put that in here, bolt it down this way, that in here and bolt it down. And then wherever that landed on this, I could just clamp this plate to this bar, and that would give me the right angle tilted this way, the right positioning going forward and backwards. And there it is. And that's how that works. And then this hole right there is the arbitrary length of the connecting rod that I'd made. I mean, maybe it could have been longer, shorter. I'm not really sure. But that's what it is. And the geometry looks pretty good, I think. And it's all welded in and it's not going anywhere. And then these little doohickeys, we had talked a little bit earlier about this. Stand by. And that was mounted right there in the front, and I was going to use that possibly to raise and lower this thing, but I did actually try it, and not only is there not enough room under the hood for ratcheting this thing back and forth to make it work, it'd be almost impossible to lower it, and I was dumb. So I had thought about getting a winch. So I did get a winch. Went to Harbor Freight, and they had this thing on sale for like less than $50. So I'm like, okay, that's just pretty cool. So, and I was going to mount that sort of this way in there, back behind there. And I even I went on Amazon, and they had a Black Friday deal for 50 feet of synthetic rope. And that way I wouldn't have to, whenever I took the pressure off of this to lower the deck, I wouldn't have that steel rope, flailing around there. It'd just be this more conformable, lighter weight. Anyway, I don't want to do that either because got to thinking about it. If I did either one of those options, then it's going to come out of the front and it's going to pick up somewhere there in the middle somewhere. But I'm still going to have a situation where the deck would be floppy, and I'd have to have some sort of stabilizers or springs or gas shocks or I don't know, something. So then I got to thinking, and actually I get to thinking, in the course of working on this thing, I was over here just like raising this up and lowering and stuff, and it's like this is really actually not heavy at all. And as much as I didn't like the idea of doing this manually, I got to thinking about it. I'm like, man, let's just do that. Let's just do this manually. Let's come up with a way that we can put chains on here or something. And I had originally thought just putting kind of like that, but just right over here, and having a chain come down diagonal. But if you look at that, that would have been like this weird, sort of weird, straight on angle, and it would have put a lot of pressure on everything, because it wouldn't be picking this up straight up and down. It'd be picking it up at kind of a crosswise angle, and it would have just put a ton of side loads on stuff. So tried to figure out a way to pick it up more straight up and down. And these pieces right here were simply drops from this. This was a rectangular piece of 1/4 inch flat bar, 1/4 inch, I guess you call it flat bar. And that's just the drop from that. And they were basically the same. So I just took them, made them the same, put holes in the same, and then stuck them up there. And sure enough, it's pretty much right in line with where I wanted it to be. Let's show you how that looks. Yeah, and it's actually not too hard to do one-handed. The first side's a little bit more difficult than the other side, but once you've got the first side clipped up, the second side basically falls in line. And yeah, there you go. It's still kind of pulling it at an angle, but it's considerably less. Yeah, that's basically it. And this height, I based this height off of, I pulled in my pull-behind mower and saw what the cut height of its blades were, and set this up so that they're the same, and that's where I ended up putting those there. One thing that I also noticed is that the low height that I had this setting was too low by like at least 1 inch. So I made some little spacers right there just to kind of lift the deck height up a little bit. And I've still got about a 1/2 inch or so that I could raise it up even more if I wanted to or need to. But in this butt, I'll only figure out later after I've tried it. Obviously, we're not exactly sitting level. And maybe that'll be okay, because the only time I'll ever do it like this, like I say, is when I'm doing my tall fields. And it might be okay, because anything really tall will just go in there and get chomped up by the blades. And what could potentially happen is I could end up with a situation where if you look at the height of the grass, where it does one of these numbers, with the 2 mowers on the side being back further, where the blade swings back, it's going to be a lower cut than the front one where the blade swings back. So it could end up being a little number like this. I don't know. It might make cool wave patterns or something, or it might be a disaster, and it will look terrible and ridiculous. And if it does all that, if it does look terrible and ridiculous, what I might could do is put a little tab right here, and then this, I could just unbolt this and put it right there for when I cut the fields, and then it'd just be a matter of undoing that nut and tightening on that one, and that would levelize this deck out and solve that problem, if it's a problem. Don't know. Now these motors, the way I've got these set in here, to make sure that I got them perfectly centered, let's check out how I did that. All right, we got the deck up here on some sawhorses, and what we're doing here is, well, working on the deck. My 51-year-old knees don't like to squat down into the ground this low anymore. Don't get old, y'all. Basically what I'm doing is I made these big old washers that fit in there, and then what that does, that's got the correct diameter. There's a little register right here, and that makes this motor fit dead center of those holes. That way I don't have to worry about the blades being a little bit off center. And then, so that'll get welded into the deck. And then I made this little adapter, this little collar. You see it's got 2 flats on the motor here. Well, there's 2 set screws in here. So you line those set screws up, tighten those set screws down, and then you run this screw all the way in. This is, of course, the bottom. And then that's how all that stuff works. And that'll end up going over here. And then once all that's installed, we'll get this back down on the ground and see how it looks. Yeah, so that's how I did that. And that just ensures that these motors and the blades are centered where they need to go, so that in their travels, spinning around, cutting stuff down the wrong way, that they don't hit each other. Now actually, they do they do kind of hit each other. If you kind of try a little bit, you can get them to work, get them to hit. But actually, they're not right now. They were earlier when it was up on the sawhorses. But maybe it was this one. Nope, they're not hitting at all. But they don't miss by much. So I guess that's by design. I do intend on putting a bearing here and then making a collar that goes around that bearing. And then I'll also have a plate that goes around here, just out a 1/4 inch. And then that way these screws can screw into that plate and sort of sandwich this deck better. And then that collar, I'll weld just some strap, just some, some metal from that collar to that little plate that I made. And that'll sort of be a support bearing for this, for the side thrust on this motor bearing. Now I'm kind of torquing on it pretty good, and there's not a whole lot of movement in there, so this might actually be just fine. And to be honest, that's how it was when this motor was in its own little mower. The motor shaft comes down to about right here, and there was a little plastic piece actually that took that flat-sided shaft and converted it to that star shape that these blades are. And the motor was designed to take the side thrust, but that was a little 21-inch lawnmower deck. But these blades, especially this one in the middle, aren't even 21 inches. I think that one's 14 and a half, and this one's 13 and a half or something. They're not even 21 inches. So the side loads on those blades will actually maybe be less than what they're designed for. I don't know. I'm probably going to do it anyway. I went ahead and ordered the bearings, and I'll look at it and see what I think. The next thing on the list is these right here. These are my controllers. I've got this little doohickey. This is just a mount that'll go roughly right there. That'll take the battery, the 48 volts from the onboard battery of the tractor, and it'll run it to this thing, which will be mounted roughly right there, I think. And then I've got to do something with these controllers. Most of these wires don't do anything, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a shelf. I'll weld some little shelves right there, and then put a piece of like 1/8 inch just sheet metal over the top of that, and then I can screw these into that, and then I'll run my 2 power wires into another one of those blocks, or maybe just have this block mounted so that it comes from the thing. Anyway, and my 3-phase wires will go into these doohickeys, and that way I can take the 3-phase wires from the motor, run it to the little doohickey, and then that's how I'll get power from the controller to the motor. And then these 3 controllers will be wired together on that, wherever I put it, on that right there, to give power to the controllers. So I think that's what I'm going to do, and that way it'll be kind of accessible, and I'll have a little shelf, and it'll be right there, and I can cover that shelf and either have the wires going that way or this way, whichever's more convenient. I don't know, we'll see, but that's next on the plate to figure out how I'm going to do that. But I think that just about covers it for this weekend. Pretty happy with how all this turned out. I drove it around the yard again just to make sure it, everything tracks right. And one thing that I am annoyed about, see that one on the left there is about that far away, and the one on the right is about that far away. It's about 1/4 inch off. That annoys the living shit out of me. But I'm not going to do anything about it because it's only 1/4 inch. If I did do something about it, all I'd have to do is just undrill those holes and then re-drill new ones over about 1/4 inch. And I might still do it. In fact, I probably will, but it won't be for a while. But anyway, I appreciate you guys watching. We'll see you next time.